The following programme contains flashing images, violence and images of dead bodies.
From the battlefields of the Middle East to the streets of Europe, Islamic State now threatens us worldwide.
ISIS wants to be in all the places it wants because it wants to increase disorder globally.
In a world exclusive, Sky News uncovered the existence of thousands of Islamic State files.
They've been recruiting globally as well, so you've got some of the best, most brilliant minds. This is really an intelligence goldmine.
Now we show not only the scale of the organisation's international recruitment network, but the true nature of the threat it poses.
They're planning on being involved in terrorist attacks abroad no matter what.
Sanliurfa in southern Turkey. An ancient trading post with traditional links to Syria. Over the past 18 months, I've been travelling in and out of the city, gathering intelligence on the civil war in Syria. Above all, I've been coming here to learn about one group in particular, Islamic State. 6 weeks ago, I had a meeting with one of the many defectors now fleeing IS. He told me his name was Abu Hamid. He spoke of his utter disillusion with the organisation.
I want to say to the people on the inside of the organization, the group is a lie. It is not Islam. There is nothing that ever follows the Sharia or Islam. It's far from Islam.
But Hamid is no ordinary defector. He has risked his life to steal one of Islamic State's most closely guarded secrets. He handed me thousands of computer files compiled by their high command. The most comprehensive intelligence leak in the organisation's history. The files are detailed entry forms for foreign fighters going back 3 years to 2012. They contain the dates of when the fighters entered and the biographical details of volunteers from over 50 countries who travelled to fight the Holy War in Iraq and Syria. These include names, telephone numbers and, crucially, details of those who recruited them in the first place. It is an intelligence goldmine.
Is this information so important that it could actually destroy Daesh?
God willing, if we will give it to those who will use it, of course.
And if you were to tell someone how to use it, what would you tell them?
This intelligence information, of course, needs to be used. It should be with people who fight against Islamic State, with people who really want to work against Islamic State, not taken by those who wish to return it to the organization.
Our analysis of the files and interviews with former Islamic State members and people with close links still to the group show that this was an organisation running a sophisticated global recruitment operation from the very start. And in a stark warning to Western governments, it's clear now that from the very beginning they were training foreign fighters to carry out terror attacks on our streets.
Fundamentally, it's a terrorist organization that believes itself as the heart of the clash of civilizations that's happening with the West at the moment. And I think what's happened now and what's changed is it seems to have decided to be much more active in bringing that clash of civilizations to the countries it's fighting against.
We've spent many weeks analysing the files, and we've now gained a fresh insight into how Islamic State operates. The files enable us not only to look at Islamic State's history in a new light, but also to gauge the extent of its global terror network. I've come here to the town of Jarablus. Even though we're still in Turkey, only a few residents remain. The majority driven away by the presence of Islamic State only a few hundred meters away across the border in Syria. Over the past 3 years, the border crossing here at Jarablus has played a crucial role in the rapid and bloody rise of the world's most feared terrorist organisation. The Islamic State files showed the places where they crossed from Turkey into Syria. Hotspots, if you like, of the terror group's movements. Now, this is the town of Jarablus. It remains an Islamic State town even now. Time and again, it is mentioned by the recruits as the place where they came to fight in Syria and to be trained. Crucially, though, despite the efforts of the Turkish authorities, it remains a crossing point even now. The files show that from April 2013 onwards, there was a steady flow of foreign fighters crossing into Syria from all over the world. But what drew them to the country in the first place? The answer lies with this man, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Baghdadi was a leader of one of the many Iraqi Sunni insurgency groups that had sprung up after the US-led invasion in 2003. A decade later, with the chaos continuing in Iraq and the civil war escalating in Syria, he announced the establishment of a radical new organisation. He called it Islamic State of Iraq and Sham, ISIS.
It was really meant to be the beacon and the home for Muslims everywhere. And he specifically made calls for those who felt alienated or those who felt like they weren't part of the West or like Westerners were fighting against him. And that message actually resonated with individuals outside of the Arab world and outside of the Muslim majority world.
The files reveal that among the very first volunteers to answer the call of Baghdadi was 25-year-old Abdul Majid Abdul Bari. In many respects, Abdul Bari fitted the profile of a Westerner who felt alienated within his own community.
He kind of typifies a kind of a type of person we seem to be seeing being drawn to fight alongside ISIS and alongside other extremist groups as well. He comes from West London. He seems to be on the periphery of sort of gang communities there. His father was a known extremist. He was involved in sort of gang activity in West London. He was a part-time aspirant rapper who was sort of making some name for himself as a figure in the sort of rap community around London.
I'm reaching out to you, Lord. I know you hear me. I hope you're near me. I can feel the lack of love.
And it was fascinating. You could look at his sort of Twitter timeline at a certain point and see the moment at which he actually started to tell people, please start taking my music videos down because I now reject that life and I've in fact discovered Islam and Islam doesn't speak for these things.
Shouts to my mother because I seen her raising 8 kids. You always knew what's best for me. I hope I die before I see you rest in peace.
In July of 2013, Abdul Bari swapped the streets of West London for the Syrian desert. 3 years on, his whereabouts remain unknown, and rumours that he has deserted the organisation are unconfirmed. In the months that followed Baghdadi's announcement, the newly proclaimed ISIS movement made rapid gains across both Syria and Iraq. And as the fighting continued, so did the need for increasing numbers of foreign recruits to realise the dream of establishing a lasting Islamic State. And an increasingly large number of those volunteers were coming from Britain. In In April 2013, the formation of a new radical jihadist movement, ISIS, had been announced. From that moment, thousands of fighters had flocked from all over the world to join the cause, and a high proportion of these were British. In October of that year, our files show that 5 volunteers from Portsmouth set out to join ISIS. The Pompey crew, as they became known, included Mohammed Hamidur Rahman, Mashadur Chowdhury and Mohammed Mehdi Hassan, all of Bangladeshi ethnic origin.
When we see the clustering of fighters, so example, a group of British fighters joining ISIS early on, what that tells us is that there's likely a network there of recruitment, of kinship, of affiliation, where potential foreign fighters aren't just going on their own, but are also talking to their friends, talking to individuals that they know, and once they've actually traveled to Syria, for example, to join the Islamic State, they're likely turning back to their home networks and facilitating others who might be considering that journey.
From analysing the files, we know that this was exactly what happened with the Portsmouth crew. On each of their arrival forms, they had registered this man, Abu Abdul Rahman al-Britani, as their sponsor. We now know he is this man, Iftikhar Jarman, also from Portsmouth, who had joined ISIS back in May 2013.
You're dealing with organizations here that are secretive networks, you know, that are worried constantly about being compromised and penetrated by intelligence agencies and others. So within that, there is a sort of vetting that has to go on. You know, you have to know who it is who's coming to join you and be able to sort of piece together where they've come from. And part of that is having a sponsor. So you have someone who kind of takes responsibility for you, or someone who can vouch for you within the organization.
Jarman was an enthusiastic user of social media such as Twitter and Instagram and Skype, and he kept in constant contact with the group back home in Portsmouth. In turn, they asked him for practical advice about making the journey and crossing into Syria. One of the men asked Jarman, "Please keep me in your prayers and help to get across with all the necessary arrangements." After weeks of messaging, they were ready. This CCTV records them walking through Gatwick Airport to catch a flight to Turkey. And a month later, they were joined by a further 5 fighters from Cardiff. They included Riyad Khan, seen here in an Islamic State recruitment video.
This is a message to the brothers who stayed behind. Wallahi ya ikhwa, you need to ask yourselves what prevents you from coming to the land of Izzah, what prevents you from joining the ranks of the Mujahideen, those that spill their blood to raise the raya of La ilaha illallah, to raise the raya of Tawheed.
The process of turning idealistic young Westerners into battle-ready jihadis must have taken intensive training over time. I wanted to try and piece together what happened to the foreign fighters after they had travelled from here in Turkey over the border. Back in Sanurfa, I made contact with yet another Islamic State defector who had recently fled Syria. And he was able to provide some insight into what happened to the raw recruits.
We have met many foreign fighters of various nationalities. They usually go straight away to attend a Sharia training camp. After that, a fighting training camp, after which they would be dispatched to various fronts. Some of them would get sent to the administrations or security sections. All foreign fighters have to surrender their passports and IDs on arrival.
Mohammed's evidence about the training is backed up by documents contained within the IS files. These are not entry forms, but the records of those who have graduated from camps after extensive military training. In all, 475 fighters are listed from 30 nationalities, including British, French, Belgians, Germans, Swedes, and Canadians. From 2014 onwards, the foreign recruits were sent from their bases in Syria over the border into Iraq. The fighters, by now highly trained and motivated, launched a series of carefully coordinated ground assaults.
The foreign fighters are usually a lot more ideological than the local fighters, and as a result, they're usually more fearsome. They take more risks in battle, and therefore it provides, greater rewards. The more risk, the more reward on the battlefield, and therefore it helps them out in many ways. It also allows them to have sort of this more hardline aspect of their ideology that can be pushed always because the foreign fighters are there, whereas the locals might be a little bit more pragmatic. It's their own home country.
One by one, Islamic State managed to secure towns and villages in Anbar province against an increasingly demoralized Iraqi army.
The Safawids were scared to meet death and did not have the nerve to continue the fight.
By June, they were within striking distance of Iraq's second biggest city, Mosul.
It was now time for more close and personal battles.
ISIS specifically worked to intimidate and to degrade the Iraqi security forces by blowing up their houses, by releasing frightening execution videos, by killing influential individuals within Mosul and in other nearby towns. And that was all part of an effort to soften that target so that when the time came, it could use its sanctuary within Syria to actually push through and conduct this blitz maneuver that made it seem like ISIS came out of nowhere, but actually was the result of several years of intentional and phased planning.
But it was here in June 2014 that the first phase of Islamic State's military campaign reached its climax. Supported now by large numbers of battle-hardened foreign fighters, they overran large parts of northern Iraq and surrounded the city of Mosul. When they attacked its centre, the Iraqi army simply fled.
The inks of light would now proclaim a new momentous era for the Ummah and the entire world.
3 weeks after the city's capture, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi rose to address the faithful. Just over a year after he had promised the formation of a caliphate, he formally announced its arrival.
So this is the basis of the religion, a book that guides a sword that aids indeed. Your brothers, the Mujahideen, were blessed with victory by Allah, and were blessed with consolidation after long years of jihad and patience.
But the new caliphate is more than a geographical area under the control of strict Sharia law. It's also a fully functioning administration capable of collecting taxes, with established schools and hospitals, and running a network of farms to feed the expanding population. Understanding that ISIS's primary aim had been to establish a fully functioning state sheds new light on the information contained in the entry forms. It explains why they go into such detail in asking recruits about their previous occupations and experience.
Putting down somebody's former occupation allows the Islamic State to assess what kind of skills the individual might have. They want to bring in people with, certain types of skills, whether administrative, whether it's doctors, whether it's engineers, and others as well, because these are key aspects of helping to build this state. Because it's not just about, fighting and killing your enemies, but also building something up too.
But around the same time as the formal establishment of the caliphate, the first clues began to emerge of ISIS's more wide-ranging and sinister ambitions. A month after Baghdadi's triumphant announcement, this man, Junaid Hussain, listed in our files, arrived in Syria.
He was an individual who was very good at IT and computers. And so he helped sort of spur on the organization's cyber caliphate group, which is a sort of organization which claimed to try to do takedown attacks sort of around the world, of sort of hacking websites, trying to pull information from places, do all sorts of disruptive things like that. He was very active across social media, and he was very active in talking to a lot of people. And what we subsequently have is evidence of him talking to an awful lot of people in the West, telling them to launch attacks, and in some cases giving them direction of how to actually do it.
One of the people who contacted Junaid Hussain is this man, who we are calling Faisal.
I first came across Junaid Hussain on Twitter, on a Twitter page called Bakia Shoutout. And the sole purpose of this Twitter page is to advertise jihadis once they've been suspended, to help them gain new followers. And I noticed that Junaid was popping up there daily. So I went onto his profile, and from there I saw the account was able to generate up to 1,000 followers within a couple of hours.
Within a few hours of establishing contact with Junaid Hussain, Faisal began to establish a relationship.
He asked, "What sort of operation do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I'm in London, what's available?" So he said, "OK, perfect. You're in the heart of the Crusader army, and we can hit them hard from there."
Hussain's next step was to send over a set of instructions.
He sent me a manual which guided me step by step on how to create the bomb. And I noticed at the end it said, "To cause even more damage, put rat poison into the bomb, which will make the kuffar, the disbelievers, bleed slowly internally."
And then finally, a message detailing the target for the lethal device.
He specified a location, which was the Armed Forces Day Parade. And he told me once the bomb was built, "I want you to go straight into the middle of the crowd. Press the button. Imagine 3,000 nails glued inside, and the outside, when it explodes, the nails travel faster than sound in every direction."
In June 2015, Islamic State's cyber terrorist unit instructed one of their followers in London to plant a bomb in the crowd celebrating Armed Forces Day. The operation was planned and directed by the head of the unit, Junaid Hussain. What Junaid didn't know was that all his conversations were being monitored by me. Junaid Hussain was passing on bomb-making instructions to someone we had recruited with the sole aim of penetrating and exposing his digital terror network. Posing now as a female, his undercover work led him directly to this woman, former punk rocker turned IS recruiter Sally Jones, who was now in a relationship with Junaid.
He messaged me back saying, "Talk to my wife, Sally Jones." And once again, she first started by asking me, "What do you want to do?" I said I wanted to do something to hurt the kuffar in the country. And she said, "Do you reckon you could be ready for this event?" And once I opened the link, it was the VJ commemorations. And after seeing who was going to be there, it was the royal family. She had planned to attack the royal family in the UK.
From the very earliest stages of our contact with Hussain and Jones, we had kept Scotland Yard's anti-terror squad fully informed. Four months later, Junaid Hussain, who was already known to both British and American intelligence, was killed in one of the many targeted drone strikes against key Islamic State figures. Hussain's death may have been a setback, but his online presence was evidence of a new phase in Islamic State's terror campaign.
I would suspect that when you sort of announce yourself as the state, that's probably the moment at which maybe the ideology of the organization would have maybe shifted a little bit more into that direction of, well, we are a state, and we are a state that's at war. And if we're a state that's at war, we have to fight back against those who are fighting against us and use the means that are at our disposal.
3 months after Hussein's death, I began picking up stories of specialist IS training camps in and around their stronghold of Raqqa in Syria. Once again, the trail led to Sanliurfa in southern Turkey. And it was here that I was able to collect some extraordinary footage smuggled across the border. In all, over 15 hours of recorded video. Some of it so technical and frankly bizarre that it was not immediately apparent what we were actually looking at. This, for example, was some form of remote-controlled car, put together in a workshop from parts scavenged from across the devastated city. It was only when we showed it to an explosives expert that it was possible to understand the significance of what we were dealing with.
This is basically a car bomb that can be delivered remotely without a human being. This is effectively, the drone of the car bombs. This mannequin is to be placed inside the car, so it will effectively make the target, the security of the target, think that there's a human being in that car. What's most chilling about this mannequin device is the level of ingenuity that's gone into it. They've created something to try and dupe some of the most advanced security detection systems in the world.
The mannequin is coated in wire and wrapped with foil to distribute heat. A self-adjusting thermostat will bring the mannequin to the same temperature as a human body. Lasers are attached to the head to create eyes. If the vehicle is scanned with any type of heat detector, it will emit the signature of a human being. Chris Hunter was familiar with some of the technology, but his greatest concern was how it could be replicated by sleeper cells abroad.
These guys can almost trial this sort of thing in a war zone, which pretty much matches those high levels of security, and then if it works, they can teach the people that are coming back here to do jihad and teach them a way to improvise it over here. You'd be talking about high-value targets, critical national infrastructure targets, things like nuclear power stations, things like government buildings, ministries, that sort of thing. In the United Kingdom, Buckingham Palace, the Houses of Parliament, number 10.
Throughout the footage were more examples that Islamic State was taking the lessons and technology of the battlefield and adapting them for a new type of warfare.
This radio control device is particularly interesting. This is something that I first came across from material I saw in Chechnya, where Chechen separatists were attacking the Russian troops there. This particular weapon is quite a lot more advanced. Not only does it provide you, a level of sophistication in terms of your radio-controlled bomb, but actually you can use it to monitor other airwaves as well, and air traffic and that sort of thing. So if we saw this integrated with the rocket system that we've seen in the footage, if we saw it integrated with a normal bomb, you could potentially have something like this outside Heathrow. You could be listening to the air traffic, and then you could fire it off at the optimum time.
What is striking about the footage is that many of the trainers and the designers make no effort at all to disguise themselves. This man, one of the most hands-on, is Turkish. Some of the instructors were Iraqi with military experience, and we identified men from Syria, Tunisia, Egypt, Pakistan, Sudan and Somalia, undergoing training to take abroad.
So you've got, the top weapons engineers, you've got the top physicists, the top electronics engineers, explosive chemists, metallurgists, ballistics guys, and they now have been recruited into this organisation. And not only have they now got this very high level of technical expertise, but they've now been recruiting globally as well. So you've got some of the best, most brilliant minds, the most technically adept people coming from foreign countries as well. And the idea is that if they send them back to the West, the impact of a terrorist attack in the West is significantly greater than the impact of an attack in Syria.
Our expert's analysis was corroborated by the defector who had risked everything to smuggle out the weapons laboratory video.
According to what we were told, these training videos were meant to train people outside Syria. Inside Syria, they train publicly anyway. The training program is meant for Europe and to cause huge damage. The program is meant to target a large number of people in more than one location. It wasn't just meant for Iraq or Syria.
The problem for the West was that this new generation of terrorists had already arrived.
Foreign fighters are an incredible asset for ISIS. The organization not only uses it for its claim to be a global caliphate, but it also enables ISIS to more easily send individuals back into Europe to take advantage of an already strained system that's now dealing with a migrant crisis to try to let individuals slip back in.
At some point during 2015, a group of 3 men travelled out of Syria and made their way to Paris. It's hard to quantify just how many fighters have ghosted their way into Europe, but we do now know the names of some of these from the Islamic State files. 24-year-old Fouad Mohamed Agad was a native Frenchman born in Strasbourg. His file records his name as Abu Sayed al-Franzi, and that he had joined the organisation in 2013. And like so many Westerners who join Islamic State, nobody saw it coming.
He was a boy who never caused any trouble. He led an extremely normal life. He was close to his family and particularly to his mother. He was successful, he was happy, he was a boy who didn't attract any attention. He fitted in. There was never a problem with Fouad.
During his time in Syria, he was in regular contact with his mother. But then suddenly he went off radar. None of his family had any idea he was back on French soil. In the autumn of 2015, a group of at least a dozen IS terrorists was hiding out in Paris. They included 24-year-old Fouad Mohamed Agad, originally from Strasbourg. Also undercover in the city was another Frenchman, Sami Amimour, who had at one time worked in Paris as a bus driver. Very little is recorded on his file, other than he had chosen to be known by the Islamic State name of Aminur Sami al-Franzi. The third member of the team was Omar Ismail Mustafa, a former petty criminal from the outskirts of the city. He too provided no further biographical details on his Islamic State entry file, other than his adopted name of Ismail Omar Mustafa al-Franzi. We now know that these 3 were part of a team of at least a dozen men, almost certainly more, who'd been dispatched from Syria on a specific mission. It was a sophisticated operation that required obtaining an arsenal of semi-automatic weapons and bomb-making equipment, as well as gathering intelligence and scouting targets, while staying one step ahead of Europe's security services. Finally, on November the 13th, 2015, they were ready.
It is now 10 o'clock. You're watching Sky News Live as we update you with this breaking news from Paris. reports that hostages, as we say, being held at the city's Bataclan concert hall.
When the terror cell struck, the results were devastating. Armed with assault rifles, hand grenades and suicide belts, they attacked 6 locations here in Paris. It was the worst loss of life on French soil since World War II.
Western authorities absolutely underestimated the extent and intent of ISIS's terror campaign. The foreign fighter problem had been discussed quite at length as we saw ISIS declare its caliphate and as we saw an unprecedented number of fighters actually go and travel to join Iraq and Syria. But it was primarily discussed as something that would happen far in the future, as a threat that wasn't quite here yet. And now the pieces are starting to link together.
The target of the 3-man squad, whose names are contained within the Islamic State files, was here, the Bataclan Theatre.
When they start to shoot, really, it looks like firecracks or something like that, or something, you know, going lights broken or something like that. And when there is few seconds between the moment they start and the moment where they stop the music. And to be honest, when they stop the music, they'll switch on the light. And then at this moment, when you see the musician just throw it away, their instruments and all the things, you say it's not normal. Some things happen because they could see it. So.
And does this whole moment, the encounter with the terrorist, does it live with you all the time? Do you think about it all the time?
Yeah. But there is several steps there. There is the attacks. There is the moment where we were hidden between the seats, and you have silence and shoot, screaming, silence, shoot, scream, etc.
While making their way to the rooftop to escape, Benoit and his brother came face to face with the terrorists.
My brother recognized this guy on the balcony.
So he saw him when he was looking?
He saw him, yeah, exactly. And yeah, definitely this one. This one asked me to close the door.
All 3 of the Bataclan attackers blew themselves up with suicide vests, making it all but impossible at first to confirm their identities. But the French authorities' task was made easier thanks to a telephone message from Iraq to the mother of one of the bombers.
When she received the message from Foued's wife, she rang me straight away to say, "It's horrible. I received a message saying my son is dead. Yesterday or the day before as a martyr with his friends. There were the attacks at the Bataclan. I'm worried it was him. Please look into it." And without the mother, we could never have identified Foued.
We now know how Foued's Islamic State bride was able to contact his mother. He had included her contact details on his original registration form when he arrived in 2013. It's a chilling reminder of the terrorist organisation's ruthless bureaucratic efficiency. In all, 7 terrorists died in the attacks on Paris, but other members of the cell were still at large. One of these was a 35-year-old Algerian national who was operating 300 kilometres away in Brussels. His name was Mohamed Belkade. His file shows that he had visited Spain, Germany and France, and that he had entered Syria in April 2014. It is recorded on his entry file that he had chosen to be a suicide bomber. According to online Islamic State propaganda, Belkade was a seasoned jihadi fighter. He took part in some of the fiercest fighting in Syria against the Assad regime, including this battle for a strategically vital military base. Its subsequent capture led to a series of well-documented atrocities against those troops loyal to the government.
We're here in the 17th Division military base just outside the city of Al-Raqqa, and we're here with the soldiers of Bashar. You can see them now digging their own graves in the very place where they were stationed.
Belkade was travelling around Belgium using a fake identity card in the name of Samir Bouzid. 4 days after the attacks in Paris, his identity card was used to transfer €750 to the cousin of this man, Abdelhamid Abaoud. Armed with clues such as these, investigators began closing in on the terror cell. And in March, French and Belgian officers began investigating a number of addresses in Brussels. When the police located and raided this safe house, their intelligence was incomplete. They expected to find it empty. Instead, they encountered a heavily armed Mohammed Belkade. In the firefight that followed, 4 officers were injured before Belkade himself was killed. Inside the house, the Belgian police found an Islamic State flag, 11 Kalashnikov ammunition loaders, and a large cache of ammunition. A week later, what was left of the terrorist cell struck again. First at Brussels Airport, and then at Malbeek metro station.
ISIS is executing a campaign to encourage and then also direct and resource attacks on the West. And it's not only to punish those who are acting against it as part of the US-led anti-ISIS coalition in Iraq and Syria. ISIS also has a more insidious campaign, which is its campaign to polarize and destabilize the West. And the organization has written about this extensively. It has a concept called destroying the gray zone. So ISIS hopes that frequent, constant attacks in its name will actually encourage European states and societies to lash back against their own Muslim populations.
The past 6 months have seen a series of military setbacks for Islamic State on the battlefield. They've lost territory and strongholds in Syria, including the city of Palmyra. During that time, I travelled to Iraq, where a coalition of Kurdish Peshmerga and Iraqi regular troops are starting to go on the offensive for the first time in 2 years. A few weeks ago, the Iraqi army began Operation Conquest. It's supported by the United States, and basically the plan is to clear out villages around Mosul before an assault on the city. Some are hoping that this will be the end, or at least the beginning of the end, of Islamic State's so-called caliphate. Initially, some believed that these setbacks on the battlefield were an immediate catalyst for the attacks on Europe. But a few days later, on our way back from Iraq, we received the latest batch of leaked material from our sources in Raqqa. These confirm the worst fears of many in the Western intelligence community, that Islamic State had been playing the long game. The infiltration of terrorist cells into the West has not been going on for just a few months, but for years. The documents never seen before are handwritten orders from Islamic State headquarters in Raqqa for a terrorist cell travelling out of Syria and are dated November 2014. They request that fighters are divided into 4 groups as part of an operation codenamed Break the Siege, sending them over the Turkish border to be deployed in infidel countries.
This is a reply to the earlier letter. It says, we have complied with your instructions. Breaking the siege refers to the citadel that needs to be broken. And what we mean by that is the European countries. These are the strongholds, and each group is given a specific role.
The documents are the final piece in the jigsaw of our 18-month investigation that has involved intelligence from a series of defectors, undercover work penetrating the digital network, and now the revelation of the secrets of its files that finally makes it possible to understand the true nature of Islamic State, both in the Middle East and now in the West.
ISIS's terror campaign is not new. It has 2 grand strategic objectives. The first is to expand its caliphate to include all historically Muslim lands, and the second is to provoke and win an apocalyptic war with the West.
I would suspect that the ambition to launch those sorts of attacks will not have gone away. And I will argue probably as a result of the success of them, you'll see a desire to do that again.
They're deadly and they're determined, and they don't seem to be prepared to stop at any point. I think they'll stop at nothing.